Good evening and welcome to Be Informed. My name is Carl Buhariwala and I founded Be Informed to help people make good decisions. Today we're looking at the topic of house designs and we are joined by Vincent Choi of Rptecture Architects, who will be talking to us today about designing eco-friendly homes in Australia. So today's session is being presented in Australia and will provide general information only. If you do have any specific queries about your designs or any architectural requirements that you might have, please do engage a professional like Vincent, who can provide you with specific and tailored information about your project. Today's session is, accurate as the content in today's session is accurate as of this month. So if you do wish to rely on the content in the future, you may wish to check its applicability and currency. And the nature of today's session will follow a 25-minute seminar, and the Q&A will take place after that. And in terms of other housekeeping activities, if you do have a question for Vincent during the Q&A session, please raise them to me in the chat function and I will relay them to Vincent for him to answer. And Vincent has also kindly prepared a one-page handout, which I'll share with registered participants by email, so you can have that copy handy with you and share it with family and friends if you wish. So today's session is being recorded as well, so if you do have to leave early, you can watch the entire session on our YouTube channel. And you can also watch past sessions on our YouTube channel as well if you've missed any in the past. Vincent has previously presented to us in relation to architectural topics to do with internships and student opportunities. So Vincent is a friend of Be Informed, and we welcome him back again, and we thank him for his support on engaging with Be Informed and its participants. So I'll now hand over to Vincent, who will take us through this seminar.
Thank you so much, Carl. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you for Be Informed. And thank you that I can be part of the family, and I can share a bit of this information. Hopefully, that will bring some impact, and those information will be useful for you to make next informed decision. So that will help you, to help you to in those areas, especially on today's topic, designing eco-friendly homes in Australia. My name is Vincent Choi. Thank you for Carl's introduction. I have 35 years of experience in architecture in Australia. To start off, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land. I pay my respects to the elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Islanders peoples joining us from across Australia. So with a show of hands, that anyone's have some level of understanding about eco-friendly design methods. So I can't see, what your response, but I would like to give some expectation before we start the presentation. The information I presented, they are in general. For some of the probably architects or people in the industry, you will find those information may not be go in depth and a lot of jargons. The purpose of this presentation is targeted more general publics who may have literally not a lot of information or education in this area, and that's the reason why the information I tend to make it general, but stay behind until the end of the presentation. I will give some really useful in the industry information to you. So let's start this. Why an eco-friendly design methods? First of all, there's a few advantage. We understand that we reduce environmental footprints and household bills. Now, let me quantify this. So we understand that this in general, that could be up to 25% of electricity use. They can cut 24% of electricity use and more than 10% of total CO2 emissions. This according to research. So we know that according to studies, that is a concrete evidence that, for eco-friendly house can give a lot of upsides in terms of saving of power and electricity and cutting down the emissions too. Uh, Upgrading is just probably worse performance among the houses. So most of the eco-friendly homes are targeting especially for new home builds. So for today's exercise, that I think we focus a lot on new home builds, and then at the end of the presentation, we will touch on some of the part of renovation projects. What do we do with those projects? And I will share my personal projects with you, and hopefully that will inspire you. So the consumptions, that we can save if reducing up to like almost a bit technical here, 900 gigawatts, per year, and save collectively in Australia more than $2 billion per year on energy bills. This is a massive saving. So some of the purpose-built, highly efficient eco homes in Australia report, they cut the bill up to like 70% compared to standard homes. So there's a huge upside for us to build the home right. So as probably you can see that a lot of existing homes, just share with you that when I first came to Australia, I used to say that some really poorly built buildings, and it's so cold. It doesn't matter how much I turn on the heater, the house is still freezing because, in a nutshell, those houses are generally built fully performance homes. Now, I stay in Victoria in Melbourne. For some of the people stay in other parts of Australia, like Queensland, obviously it's a different matters. But a well-built homes in general, even in Queensland area, in hotter climate, you can still keep the cool of the house and reduce the bills up to like 50 to 70% in terms of your general energy bills, according to the statistics. So it does have a long-term value and resilience. Okay, next one. So the key challenge that we have is how can we balance between being sustainability, so cost and aesthetics. So often, a lot of people think that, oh, gee, it costs too much, or would it compromise the aesthetics? Now, we have to understand that Australia will have a huge climate zones. From the north, like Darwin's is really hot weather, highly humid area. Then all the way to Tasmania is in general, there's much cooler climate. So well-built, eco-friendly homes, it should be able to cover, doesn't matter what kind of climate. It still can give a higher values in terms of the energy efficiency and also in terms of insulations. Navigating, for example, that we have NCC in Australia, that you have the Australian National Construction Code to govern all these uh, installations and the build qualities. And of course, there's another house body as nationwide house energy rating schemes. NETAS is another organization that will control the quality of that energy efficient built homes. In New South Wales, there's a Building Sustainability Index basics compliances. So different states, have different rules and regulations. But in general, today we focus on more NCC regulations here. So that is probably a quite big misconceptions. They think that equal to expensive. Now, let us dissect this. It is true, eco home, because it's a better built homes, it will require uh, a, a more insulation, and that is the reason why it is more expensive. For example, I stay in a house that is like built before the energy ratings kicks in. In general, even external skins of the house, there's no insulation. Literally, it's a brick and timber and plasterboard. There's no such thing called insulation. For those who stay in Australia, we know this. Now, so starting in the 1st of May 2024 in Victoria, we require 7 stars energy rating homes. What does it mean? Obviously, that is I won't get into a lot of details. 7 stars, in terms of compliances of the insulation index, including, the external skins of the house, the floor insulation, and the ceiling. Basically, it wrapped around the whole building. Imagine it's just like any human beings, right? Like for us, if it is a winter, we put a few more layers of jackets in. And that's exactly how it keeps us warm. The same principle that we apply to the houses. We need to wrap around with insulation and keep it well insulated and keep the heat and the cooling inside the house. So doesn't matter what is the temperature changes outside, it should not affect the internal temperature. So that is what we expected as a well-built home. So the next one, we have the core design principle. So there's in the market, there's a higher a higher quality built homes. It is called passive home design. So obviously it will consider the orientation, shading, and ventilation. All this play a part. In Australia, now we have to orientate the house facing north, especially for those cities that down south, closer to the south of the continent. So north facing, that's when the winter we have more north suns in winter that will penetrate deep inside the house. Obviously, will warm up the house and save energies. Now, the other one that we focus on in general is high performance insulation and glazing. So for me, sometimes, if this is for your dream homes, I will highly recommend to go above and beyond the NCC minimum standards. The reason is since you are paying for a house with the insulations, why not upgrade it to a next level so your house, can actually have a high performance insulation. And in terms of glazing, it's not just double glazing. There's a window types that give you, they call it thermal bricks, meaning that if it is aluminum frame, metal itself is a heat conductor. So for a thermal bricks window frame, it will stop all the cold transfer into your house. And you pay more for those type of window design. Water efficiency, that obviously, that we can have rainwater tanks, you can connect the rainwater, grey water, and then water the garden. I think this is a common practice nowadays. I think a lot of new houses will have that. The next one, sustainable materials. So we would highly recommend to use local materials, especially made in Australia, that it will help to um, lower embodied energy for those materials, and also it's a local materials. Now I'll share one big tips to a lot of people. I have aware some of the people import timber from other part of the countries, for example, in China or in Indonesia, Malaysia. Now, because they're timber producing countries, now I will give a caution to those people: don't import those timbers. And the reason is when they make those timbers, is suitable for their climate. So, but when it's come to like Melbourne, Sydney, or Tasmania, we have drier weather. So when you install for the first few months, it's okay. As that those timber materials stay on, it start to shrink because our moisture, our humidities in Melbourne, Tasmania, in the southern part of Australia is drier. So it slowly dried up. When the timber dried up, you know what? You start to have gaps. So we see a lot of people probably they're not aware of this and they thought that, oh, they just import materials from overseas. They without, substantial understanding about the impact of the weather to the materials. So moisture content can affect the timber. So it's a huge It's a huge tips that I'll give it to you. Now, even my brother, I'll give you another example. My brother stay in US. He imported timber from overseas. And you know what? He has a slab heating. Can you imagine the timber imported from overseas, a higher moisture content, and they have a slab heating? The materials start to change after a couple of months. So now he has to bear the cost of replacing the whole timber floor. It is hard, especially when you have furniture on it. You have to literally move out all the furniture and move out and replace all the floor. So it actually costs even more money. So that there's something that I want to give warnings to those people that consult your architects when it comes to designing homes. They should be able to give you uh, in-depth and professional opinions. Next one is renewable energies on solar and battery integration. Now in Australia, governments give you a really uh, substantial subsidies for solar and battery. Like for example, I'll give you some ideas that recently I get a quotation for solar and battery. It costs about 3,500 to have 6.5 kilowatt solar panels. On top of that, government give you a no interest loans about 1,400. So it's all up about $5,000 dollars to have the 6.5 kilowatt. Now, I was told the selling into the grid, there's not much benefits anymore. So, it has been changed so much. But I think one of the key reasons why people use solar is charging a EV car. So the best is to come with the battery. So for the recent quotation, I got it, including battery and solar, it will cost roughly about $9,000, inclusive of the 1,400 no interest-free loan from the government. So you guys have to make your decision whether you think the payback time is worth to do the solar and battery. Obviously, the more electricity you use, it is more beneficial if you use a solar and battery. Now, for the situation in um, Melbourne, Adelaide, and probably Tasmania, because winter we don't have a lot of sunshine, and those solar and battery, obviously it is not as efficient as compared to a warmer climate like in Queensland, New Territories. So obviously it will be different. Next one. So the benefit of eco-friendly homes, obviously, as I mentioned, has lower running costs and improved comfort. Most of the feedback I got for those who has to install the solar panels, literally they don't hardly pay any electrical bill. So you need to work out, the payback time to make it worth it. In general, I think depends on how much electricity you use. In general, payback time is probably 4 to 5 years. It depends on the amount of electricity that you use. So nowadays we have 7 stars in Victoria compared to 6 stars. In general, we cut back a saving of 25% of reduction of emission. And obviously, that will convert it into saving in heating and cooling. It's better health and indoor air quality for those who have hay fever. Now, the trends in the market is the market is start to gear towards passive home design where they wrap the whole house airtight. So started in 1990s in Germany, they start to build this called passive home. And now Australia is catching up on the trend to build those high quality passive homes. So one of the benefit is because the house is fully wrapped over, so you can have filters for the airs that suck into the house. Now, that will drastically stop the hay fever because if you add filter to your air intakes, obviously it can filter the pollens where this is the particles that cause the hay fever. So we find that a lot of people that have hay fever, they prefer to build passive home. So another benefit is high property values and market appeals. In Melbourne, the uplift in values for energy efficient homes has been reported up to 23-24%. There's a positive impact, obviously, to the community and environment. Next one. So the practical tips for homeowners and designers. Now, I would highly recommend you speak to your architects as early as possible. Most of the designer, they're happy to give you some free consultations in terms of educating, in what direction, in sort of direction you want to do, whether it's a passive home, obviously it costs more, or a 7 stars rated house. Now, for seven stars rating homes, has been mandatory in Victoria. Obviously, in other states, that will be different. So you can design something really for climate and site-specific orientation that has a huge, massive impact to your house. But one observation I have is that when they do townhouses, sometimes they may not be some multi-unit townhouses, I should say, they may not be really site-specific in terms of getting the maximum orientation towards the north. As you can imagine, they tend to um, line up according to site and maximizing the yield of the development. So I think some things for the consumer is when next time if you buy a new homes, I would suggest that pay attention to the house whether it is facing the north. That will give you a lot more upside when you buy your next properties. Next one, set a clear sustainability goal and realistic budget. Now, obviously, everyone's will have different construction budgets, but I would highly, highly recommend to discuss budgets with your architects as early as possible. Because we find that nowadays, almost like 80 to like high percentage, 80 to 90% of the projects are blow out of the budget. And that will really affect, the customer, especially they speak to the banks, for certain budgets. And when they design with the high material costs and the labor costs, a lot of projects are blow out of the budget. And especially when you're building the passive homes, that will cost more. So I would highly recommend that people, when they do budgeting, discuss with your architects. And on top of that, I would suggest to have like 10% of the contingency budget for put it in the side, in the pockets, that that is handle a lot of budget blowout. In terms of, obviously, 10% budget blowout is not a lot, but I heard some cases that they double. So controlling budgets right from the beginnings, have a realistic goal is super important. Now, talk to your builders and architects so you can find a middle ground, because sometimes I find that some of the people talking to builders, they may not tell you the true figures. Obviously, there's no specification. So it's hard to review the true construction budget. So I would highly recommend speak to the architects. And for some of the larger homes, I would suggest to engage QS, quantity surveyor, to lock in the budget. The next one is collaborate with consultants and builder. As I mentioned, that those consultants will help you. Obviously, I would suggest to get a few architects or builders, get a few opinions, so you get to understand that can varies a lot, and make sure that you get the real picture of what will be the outcome in terms of your budget. Use rebates and apply government incentives. I think this one a lot of people will be aware, especially for solars and gas. Governments a lot of depends on the states that where you stay in. In Victoria, the example in Victoria, so government have an initiative to change from some of the heating units into electricity, get rid of the gas heating into the electrical heating units. Government will give you a lot of rebates. I think hot water as well. They are phasing out all the gas hot water units and change it into heat pumps, which can save a lot of your electricity as well. And on top of that is a solar panel. So governments have a lot of pushes and incentive in terms of helping your house getting more greener and eco-friendly. Now, the last ones that I want to mention is understand that for new houses that we have to put in insulation. Now, according to the regulations, NCC, that is no on-site checking of the type of insulation that they used for the house. So I heard a few cases that, the builder, not all the builder, obviously, there's some cases that builder may not put in according to the specification, meaning that if the specification is the rating 7, they may put something cheaper. So I would highly recommend for those that are building new homes, engage inspector or engage your architects to do the inspection. Now, a lot of people will say that, the building surveyor will be checking the project, isn't it? You pay for the building surveyor. Now, the building surveyor will check other things. According to the regulation, there's a 5 checkings for the building surveyor. But checking the insulations, there is not fall under the building surveyor. So I will highly recommend before they cover the plasterboard, check those insulation they bought into the site that will be labeled on the packagings, and make sure that the builder installed the right type of insulation as specified on the drawings. That is a big tips for those people. Now, another points that I want to discuss is those materials that I discussed today is more about the new build. Some people will ask, what about those type of building is existing and I want to do renovations? Now, currently, the regulation they will not be force the owners to do insulation for existing building, because for a simple reasons that it will cost just a lot of money when you remove all the plasterboard and install all the insulation. Obviously, you can do it if you have the money, but the regulations do not regulate on this. However, I would highly recommend, for some of the areas that put insulation, even in with the benefit of sun. For example, showers. Often, a lot of people take showers. The noise can transfer. And I would recommend to put sound insulations even in the wet area when you are doing renovation, if you have to build new walls. And that is the opportunities that you can put into insulation for some of the existing structure. I think that's a good one. Now, there's 2 areas that you can improve the insulation of your existing home. One is the ceiling, because you can open up the ceiling panels and do it up the whole ceilings. Another one is if there's some old houses, they're sitting on the stumps, you can do the insulation at the bottom of the floor structure. This is another way that you can improve the performance of your house being eco-friendly. As another tips that people may consider is to replace some of the old windows by with double glazings, and that will drastically improve a lot of thermal performance of your existing homes. Now, I hope all these things will help you, and they are practical tips that I want to see that the whole building industry moving forward into more eco-friendly homes. So with that, I conclude my presentation of today. There's a lot of materials that if I say so fast, you can always go back to the YouTube to listen to some of the materials. You're welcome to share and comment. If you have any questions for me, you can. I think Carl will send you the one page running sheet with the information of our companies. You can ask any questions. We are happy to help you along your journeys, and even questions that of the projects that you are doing. Now, you may not engage our company to do anything, but because of the Be Informed, I'm happy to help you to answer some of the questions that you have, maybe even during construction now. So I'm happy to help out. So with that, I pass it back to Carl. If there's any question from the audience today.
Yeah. No, thank you, Vincent. I'll just share Vincent's details again on screen. So before we proceed to Q&A, thank you, Vincent, for your seminar. It's a very detailed seminar. You get a lot of practical tips and I guess showcase some of the insights that you sort of see in your work. And hopefully those that have joined today or will join in the future can take on board some of those insights and recommendations and implement them into their projects, whether it be a new build or renovation. I think you've covered quite a lot, so that's really great. So Vincent's details are on screen. If you do have any specific queries or wish to engage him and his firm, you can always do so. And the details will also be in the one-page handout that I'll send through to registered participants following the session today. So today's session is being recorded. If you have joined late, you can watch the entire session on our YouTube channel. And with that in mind, Vincent, let's head into the Q&A part of the session. First question, Vincent, that we have is around engaging, I guess, architects' support with the design of the eco-friendly home. Can you just summarize, Vincent, and sort of, how do you go about discussing this topic with your clients? Is there a process that you follow? Do you look at the objectives of the client in the orientation you mentioned during the seminar? Maybe just a quick summary of how you sort of provide your recommendations.
Yes, a good question. Now, in general, because in Victoria, probably more a state-specific answer here. In general, the NCC and the planning control that give a lot of incentive for the designer to design eco-friendly home in general. Now, I pay more attention to some of the people I heard when they have allergies, with even paint smell or some chemicals. I heard some of the families, or students had those issues that I would highly recommend, to speak to your designer when it comes to specifically even on the paints that they used, the floor materials they use, because sometimes they use, like for example, they use timber floor, polished floorboards. The chemical that they put in, they can be they have strong chemical smells. So then you have to pay a bit more for those ethanoids, certain types of chemicals that is eco-friendly, that you wouldn't have those issues. Apart from that, obviously, I think some people, I heard some questions from the customers say, "Oh, Vincent, I know, it is excellent. It's high performance home for passive home design, but I don't have the budgets because it costs more to do it." Now, I would suggest, for example, in Victoria, we have 7 stars rating. So you know what? You don't have to go 7 stars minimum. You can go to 8 star. You just have a really simple cost efficient tips for everyone is just upgrade your installations just to one notch above. The cost is just negligible in terms of the building costs, and it will have a higher performance values in terms of insulation. That will be the tips, the biggest tips that I would want to share with the general public. Don't go the lowest if you can afford it, right? Just go a little bit higher. That's still make a huge impact to your house.
Vincent, how often do you see people taking on board these recommendations? Is this, a widespread sort of acceptance of, designing new homes or doing renovations with eco-friendly concepts in mind? Or do you still see a sort of a maturity uplift required in the knowledge of customers to sort of get on board with this concept? Sort of where do you see the current market at?
Yeah, we find that for developers who go, we have two types of customers. The first type is developer. They tend to do the minimum for the very reason that they are investor, developer, they're out there to make money. So they will go for the minimum as the regulation require. But the other type of customers, they are doing it for long term, and they will be very interested to listen to tips and being educated. How can they have a longevities and a well-built homes? They are the categories that they easily, that are share this information. They easily take on board with all these ideas because obviously you build homes that will last 30, 40 years, and you get all your investment back straight away in the first 5 years, literally. Mm.
Mm. And just one question that we've got, Vincent, is in relation to, I guess, renovations. Um, when people are engaging, builders and the consultants to sort of scope out the renovation and what have you, um, with regards to some of the eco-friendly principles, I know you suggested a few, like insulating around showers or between floors or under the floor, all those sorts of things. On average, do you see those projects going over budget, or is it, you know, depending on what the customer wants and the budget that they've recommended, the design can be built into that budget parameter so that it doesn't have to go over budget? Like, how often do you see projects staying on budget versus projects having to go over budget?
Okay, very good questions. Now, so for projects that we took on board for my practice, I will speak to the customer from day
Mm,
one. I want to control the budget. So we are very open and upfront about costs from day one. Now, understand, when not every designer probably feel comfortable to talk about money at the first meeting with the customer. So often, sometimes we find that in the market, not every designer talk about budgets right from the beginning. Now, obviously, this is a general statement. I'm sure a lot of people in the market, architects, will talk about that, early on. So the practice that we have is we understand that we often see some projects that came from another practice. Actually, and they came to us because they're over budget, they had to redesign. So I find that, it's just wasting people's time and money, obviously, if we don't have the understanding of budgets right from the beginning. I understand that, prices can fluctuate. I understand, all get this. But if it is like 10, 20%, 30% maybe, but not like 100% over. You know what I'm saying? If it is like, say, for example, $1.5 million home, at the beginning, it ended up become $3 million. You know what? The client would say, "No, Vincent, where did I get all this money coming from?" Not everyone can do it. So we often, we would educate the customer right from the beginnings that if you want to spend like, for example, $1.5 million homes, you need to minus the GST, minus the demolitions, there will be side cut, the landscaping, maybe a retaining wall, it's a sloping land, and how much you get for the rest, driveway, how much you left for the building. So we need to go through this education process with the customers. Then they start to realize that, gee, there's not much for $1.5 million home. Then maybe they scale it back because without telling them the real picture, I can't blame the customers. I thought 1.5 is like just for the building, but in reality, no. Your $1.5 million, minus a lot of things. What else do you have? Maybe only 60% of the actual budget is for the building itself. Would it make sense? Does it make sense to you?
yeah, yeah, no, you're right. There are a lot of pre-costs involved and getting the site prepared and the like, so you have to factor all that in. Um, Vincent, just in your experience, we've spoken a lot about sort of the house design. We have a question just around landscaping and sort of the garden area. Do you get involved in that type of eco-friendly design, or do you leave it to the landscapers? If not, if you do it yourself, any sort of tips that you can recommend for our audience today?
Yeah. So very good question. Very good questions. Uh, If it is involved landscaping, so we will communicate with the landscapers of the eco-friendly design, including the irrigation systems, and sometimes we will plant certain plants like in the western side, more canopy trees to shade the house. I think that there's a few things that we will work together with the landscaper. Now, we are not a landscaper, but we understand the principle of eco-friendly homes that we will work together with the landscaper.
Yeah, so you'll collaborate with them and sort of share the principles that need to be, I guess,
That's right.
adhered to. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And
Mhm.
um, Vincent, you're mentioning with the new builds and with developers, and of course, as you know, with we take Victoria as an example, and even most capital cities, there's a lot of urban development, vertical towers, and all that. A lot of condensed living now in the inner pockets of the state. With the sort of urban developments increasing and the apartment buildings, uh, how do the principles for the eco-friendly homes differ to, say, a standalone house or just two townhouses on the block? You mentioned that they want to follow the minimum requirements given their role in
Yeah.
the project, but
Mhm.
I guess it is important for them when they're selling it and to ultimately hand it off to individuals that might want to live there or rent it out, that they do abide by at least good quality principles. So what's your experience to date with the developers engaging with you people and also taking on board the recommendations?
For the high rises, you mentioned
Mm,
as
mm,
compared to townhouses. Now,
correct.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so now I don't have a lot of experiences with the high rises apartments, but the high rise apartments you still have to comply. In Victoria, it's a 7 stars ratings. So you can see nowadays a lot of apartments. Actually, some of the apartments we're dealing with. Some apartments actually have some other building defects, in which I won't mention. But in terms of the eco-friendly, I think they're pretty decent if you are buying from the reputable developers, because a lot of the apartments are pretty good in terms of air tightness. So I find that one of the biggest issue besides insulations of the building is air tightness. So passive home adjusts that, make it super airtight. So same thing for apartments, when you close up everything, you literally airtight it. Especially for high rises, they will do something called wind pressure tests. I'm not sure whether you heard about this. When you have a high rise apartment, like 10-story, 20-story, or 30 stories, you will subject it to a lot of wind pressure. So air pressure is very powerful. It will find little small gaps, get into the building. So for those apartment style projects, the window quality is another level. It's a commercial grade, meaning that when you shut the door, it's airtight. So yeah, can you imagine this
Mm,
apartment? The biggest chance to leak air is through the door or windows, literally, and the rest is airtight. So window quality is excellent, and the rest is it is the door. Now the door is only leaking to the corridor. This is another insulation, and that is the reason why those apartments, right, they're pretty good in terms of eco-friendly, in terms of insulations. Yeah, in particular.
mm. And on that topic, Vincent, do you engage with the engineers as well, with the HVAC system and all those other aspects in the design? Do you engage in your capacity as an architect with those stakeholders as well?
Yeah, so obviously we will engage the engineers and discuss the air conditionings and stuff like this. So for apartment, it's quite standard. The whole aircon system is quite standard. So basically, it's all highly energy saving in terms of the all the air conditioning. It's all individual apartments, obviously, unless it's in common area. So it's very typical and common because imagine it's just a tiny small apartments. And nowadays the air conditioning are highly efficient. Yeah. Pretty good, pretty good. Yeah. Mm.
Mm. And Vincent, we've got an interesting question here. So we've talked a lot about eco-friendly principles and ensuring that the design captures some of them, and it's better to do a bit more than you can to at least reap the benefits in the future. How do they perform over time, and what's the maintenance required? Is the quality overall good? Of course, it depends on who you engage and how much you want to spend, I guess. But any key tips that you've got, Vincent, to maintain the principles that have been embedded into the house design and ultimately built in the
Yeah.
home?
Yeah, very, very good questions once again. Now, to create the eco-friendly homes, a lot of things that is what you don't see. For example, insulation is all high inside. They will last forever, long time. But what I want to stress here is external. Now, I just received a YouTube videos on New Zealand have a huge issue on the external cladding. About probably 30 years ago, 30 years ago, for some reason in New Zealand, they use plasterboard. Believe me or not, it's crazy. A plasterboard type of material for external.
Mm.
Now it create a lot of leaks to the
Mm.
building. So they have a huge, massive, I think, court case against the government to allow this type of construction. So obviously, like in Victoria, or not just in Victoria, probably other states as well. Remember, we have the huge cladding issue for high rises. They are not fire compliances, not fire compliance. So the same thing in New Zealand now, they are facing this issue. Now, I think constantly in our building industry, we battling with new material, cheaper materials, new materials coming in, and they claim that they can do all these things. They even give you 10 years warranty. But what happened after 10 years? Now, I want to stretch these ideas in this forum to educate a lot of people who are listening, including architects as well. Because I've been in industry for like more than 3 decades, I see enough of cases that often a lot of designer, sometimes within the industry, we can be short-sighted in terms of, oh, they give you 10 years or 20 years warranty. Oh, that's it. Peace of mind. Now, you know what? We're dealing with a lot of defects projects now in our company. Now, including some cladding issue, which is quite common. Government give some funding to replace the cladding. But now we are dealing with some leaking problems, balcony leaking issues, window leakings, roof leakings as well. So I know the topic is probably slightly deviate from eco-friendly homes, but what I want to share with the general public is a well-built home is gold, especially if this is your uh, dream home that you're going to live there for a long time. So for developers, a little bit hard to sell this message because they will say that, oh, it comply to NCC or it comply to Australian standard. Oh, that's it. They will do the minimum. So I'm here to advocate the industry to, especially designer, we have on our shoulder that we have to make a lot of good decisions. Because at the end of the day, ultimately, designer decides what to specify on the drawings. And I hoped within the industry, we can specify those materials that will last more than 20 years. Because most of the building, you know what? It will stay on for 40, 50, and even 100 years. So
Mm.
now we are talking about climate change and embedded, energy, all these things. If we are very short-sighted, just specify those materials won't last long time. You know what? We start to build a lot of rubbish, literally. After, 20, 30 years, those buildings need to be demolished because because people will say, oh, just the cladding. You don't have to demolish the building. Now, listen, what happened in New Zealand, it proved the point. The repair bill is just too much. And no
Mm.
one want to buy your property. It literally, the value of the property drops because they use the wrong materials. Now, Google it in New Zealand, cladding materials issues. I think the YouTube, you can listen to a lot of news, what happened in New Zealand. Now, learn these lessons from other countries. because it can happen in Australia. I think it's happening already. Some of the building that we inspect. So I
Right.
think as an industry, we need to be more aware of all these things happening. And when we are making those decisions, we have to be really careful. I hope that helps everyone here who is listening.
No, thank you. That's very wise, and I think it's important that if you start sacrificing on those aspects, then you will face problems in the
Absolutely.
future, and that's not a
Absolutely.
very
Mm.
effective approach to take. So, no, thank you, Vincent, for that. That brings us sort of to the end of the Q&A part of the session. I'll just bring up Vincent's details again on screen so you can take a note of those. If you have registered by email, I'll also send you a one-page handout that Vincent has prepared, and his details will also be in that document. And you can share them with family, friends if you found this session useful. As a reminder, the session has been recorded, so if you have joined late, you can watch the entire session on our YouTube channel following today's session. And really, I just want to thank Vincent for his time that he's taken out of today to present to you all, and for those that watch the session in the future. And hopefully you found something useful that you can take away and make more informed decisions. So that brings us to the end of today's session. If you found this session useful, please do subscribe to us, follow us, like us, do whatever you want. And if you do have any questions for Vincent, you can always engage with him directly for any support and for any professional services you require. So thank you, Vincent, for your time. And
Thank you, Carlos.
thank you all for attending, and hopefully those in the future will find this useful too. So with that in mind, we'll close for today. And for those in Melbourne, have a good evening. And for those elsewhere, have a good day. All right. Bye-bye. Bye
Thank
for
you,
now.
everyone. See you.